I remember days they used to laugh at me. Used to show them on my records talking casually. Used to say it was a passion on my path to be. Then they told me that I couldn't, so I had to be. Tell me what they really think about it now. Used to hate it, but I guarantee they're proud. Had to do it just to show them that I could, yeah. Now I finally think I took it where I should, yeah. Had a jokes on you and now you're on and laughing. I did a whole lot of winning. Look, it came from a passion. I see a whole lot of no ones I could see now in public. And that may think a lot of things, man. At least think something, now you the judge. And now tell me where you ended up. Yeah. Look, I bet it was a simple job. Yeah. Look, I went and took a different route. Yeah. Look, that's why my life is different now. Back in my feelings, look, when I wasn't so gifted and I was learning to do this, and all I heard were the critics, and I don't blame you for that shit. Look, I was way out the basis, but I just needed some talent so I could wait this to greatness. Oh yeah, you ain't ever think this, no, no, no. Stop me while I started, homie, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now this shit settled, it's go better and better, but I'll always remember, yeah, yeah.
Maresa Friedman, what's happening?
What up? Nice to be here.
Live from San Diego. Well, we're not really live. We're recording here live. I'm live right now.
Live-ish. Let's use real estate terms. Live adjacent.
Yeah, live adjacent. Hey, listen, I'm like so happy I got to meet you. I went to Secret Knock. Shout out to Greg Reed.
Yeah.
Great event. I've been to it 4 or 5 times, and I always feel like a family. You know, I'm a family member there. Yeah. But I think we might have met maybe at one of them before, whatever. But we got to talking, and I heard some of the things you were into, and I was like, I got to get you in here to interview you, hear the story, and find out more about what you're doing and how you got to be able to do what you're doing.
Yeah,
you know? And
it's a road, man. I think the first thing to know about me is for the age that I am, you know, I just hit like 41, but I've been in the workforce since I was 15. So I got in trouble hacking and was recruited by the Department of Energy, Department of Defense.
No shit, I didn't know that.
So yeah, so
wait a minute, hacking. So
yeah.
where did you start to learn about that?
You know, it was an interesting time because, like, I joke, like, the early days of the internet, you know, the late 1900s, as it were, like, you know, it's the era of AOL and just, like, I like puzzles, right? And I'm on the spectrum, so I love puzzles and I recognize patterns. And so those two things together are an interesting combination, and I'm very curious, right? And curiosity can get you in trouble sometimes, but sometimes it can create an opportunity. And for that, I'm grateful, man. I went up.
Well, being on the spectrum is a superpower.
Yeah, I think it's turning your curse into a superpower, whatever it is a really good thing, right? So you look at like the joke is like any story that I'm in or someone's telling me, I'm never surprised when they get to the end because my brain has tried to figure out all possible outcomes of where the conversation is going to go, right? It's just going to go, okay. So, you know, when you start working that young and you're in charge of people 2-3 times your age, right? You learn really quickly that in order to lead anyone or anything, first you have to be confident, but 2, you really have to be curious about people because no one gives a crap about your goal until you can help them see what their goals are. And if you're trying to introduce process and structure to a team of people that are set in their ways or an entrepreneur or a founder, you have to show them where process shows up in their life already. Right? I can't tell you this is what I want you to do because it's just benefiting me, right? So to be curious about people, you really find out in the beginning, anything can be slow, but when you start to ask people, like, what is it they really want? Why are they here and why does it matter? Most people are never asked that question, right? It's just like you're doing this thing because you like it or you're creative or whatever. Most people I meet are really good at the thing.
Yeah.
They're not good at selling the thing. They're not good at putting money behind the thing. They're in their art, whatever that art is. And so when you start working that young, you just become like a sociologist. You just observe people and patterns, man. And so
so what you're saying is you align their personal goals with whatever the other mission is, and then that way you can tie it to that. When you need to hold people accountable, it's not to the company mission, it's their mission. It's
like they're going to fail themselves.
Yeah.
So when we look at things that like I do specifically around conversation design, most people are out there. I mean, we were just at an event, right? And I think you're one of 3 things, right? You're either going to be a friend, right? Or you're going to be a pitcher, which is every time you see somebody, they got to pitch you something different, right? Or you're going to be a guide, right? And I prefer to be a guide because I can be friendly with people, but really I'm not as focused on what I need. I'm trying to get other people, like, what is it that you want? What is the thing that really matters to you? And it's just a different way about going through things.
Yeah.
And again, when you look at business strategy or monetization strategy, whatever it is, I got to figure out like, well, why do you want that? Like, why did you put this business together? Why does it matter? What's your gift? What are you bringing to the world? Right? Because a lot of people get very obsessed with their story.
Yeah.
And the story only matters as much as you can anchor it to why it's important. Like, what does it mean to somebody else? Right? Like, so for me, it's, I work with a lot of men. I work with, I would say like 95% men, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily by design. That's just what's attracted to me. But I think it's because
Men are attracted to her.
I'm a business mom. I'm your mean mommy.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the things that
Yep.
when you've got a ton of people surrounding you that are telling you what you want to hear, you've got to have that person that's going to be like, no, dude, I disagree. That's not actually how it works. And you're being an ass, right? Like, I'm the person that can say that.
But that's why you work with a lot of professional athletes too,
Yes.
because they need that. They're surrounded. They come into money. They're
Yeah.
surrounded. Obviously, they're gifted.
Yeah.
So they're sitting on this
Listen, they're
high horse,
the top 1% of the 1%, right?
and then everybody's trying to lead them into their goals where they want them to go. All this, their
Everyone's got a
entourage.
guy. Everyone's got a
Yeah.
person. And most people, the reason so many of them, within 18 to 24 months of leaving the sport don't have money is because they're not thinking about the long term. They're thinking about the now. And I think it's kind of a funny thing to say, but like delayed gratification in anything is going to yield a phenomenal result. I don't care if you're dating and you want to hook up with somebody or, a business deal, getting to know people. That building of a return on relationship is what I call it, is really important, because my goal is to figure out, okay, cool, you're an athlete, you've got your thing, you've got the big sponsorships, you got all that. You make one mistake, it goes away. You say the wrong thing, someone accuses you of doing something, and now you're on a press tour trying to apologize, right?
Yep.
And my belief is, I tell people, don't apologize. Like, fundamentally, if you didn't do anything wrong, don't apologize. I don't care if you're a political official, an NFL athlete, a CEO, because once you start apologizing, you'll never stop. Right. But also, you can lean into the lessons and grace, but you also have to have people around you that are willing to disagree. I think that's what I see most founders and most people, where they make the mistake is you've got all your yes people, and anyone that has a dissenting opinion is negative, right? And it's like, no, it's not negative. It's pragmatic. You need someone that's going to be, challenging you. I think that's probably why the women that I do work with are okay with being confronted. Confrontation is a really positive thing. If you look at it from the lens of like, I'm getting feedback to be better, right? I'm getting feedback. I'm paying someone to tell me to identify the blind spots, right? There's this thing called willful blindness.
Yeah.
And it's why people ignore the obvious at their own peril. And what I see is a lot of times people just aren't transparent with how they work or why they work. And that's why you get the pictures, right? Like, you go to events and you can see them. They're handing out business cards. They're not listening to you. They're very focused on the thing that they want to sell or do. And you kind of realize that they repel you a little bit, right? You're just like, no, thank you, not interested. Now, be a woman in that environment where there's like all kinds of dynamics at play. I think it's just fun to just listen to people.
Yeah.
I observe, man.
Well, let's talk about confrontation for a minute, because most people have a negative connotation what confrontation means.
Sure.
And everything in life, problems that we have is because we're unwilling to confront something.
Yeah.
And you will be forced to confront.
Yes, 1,000%.
Pressure builds.
Yes.
And it builds and it builds. And eventually, when you're forced to confront, that's when people get miserable.
Yeah.
And it sucks. The faster you can confront, the better.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's I've been sober like going on almost 15 years, and there's one thing that I've learned, which is like, before I go to criticize anybody else, I look at myself, right? What am I not doing? What's this bringing up in me? And then I determine, like, is this worth having the conversation? Will the person be open? And I frame everything with love, respect, and kindness. And also, it's like, I got to keep it real, right? If I can't get to my goal because someone is sabotaging themselves, which a lot of people do. A lot of people have patterns of sabotage that they don't even realize it's there, whether it's in relationship, right? Whether it's in friendship, whether it's they go to an event for a particular purpose and then they get in party mode, and so they forget why they were there, right? And that's a real thing. But to have a crucial confrontation is to just kind of, again, frame it with love and respect, but keep it real. And a lot of people refer to me as like, I'm working, like, they're like, it's like you're a shot of espresso. There's no milk, there's no sugar. Like, there's plenty of coaches that are going to be loving, kind, hold your hand. I'm more like, you know,
achieve the goal.
like,
the
let's
goal?
get to what we need to do. And if I have to stop and consider every single time I'm going to hurt someone's feelings, like feelings are going to get hurt. But just because you feel some way, it's a defense mechanism. And so to go into that with people and just say, you're not always going to agree. You're responsible for this thing that we're co-creating together, because it is a co-creation. And that's where I want to co-create with people. I want to build cool shit with cool people that aligns with our goals and our values. And if people aren't interested, it's like Tinder for business, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, no. There's no maybe button.
Yeah.
Right?
So I got to talk about the event thing, right? I remember when I first started going to events, I was probably late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
I really never went to events before. I didn't understand. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
So then when I first started going, I'm like, oh, this is a party. And I was still drinking and partying. Yeah. And I would do that. I would go to the event. I would be the one that would sit to listen to the speakers. So I wanted to gain information. But as soon as the thing was over, where's the party? Where are we going? Yeah. And I would be out late. And then I'd feel like hungover the next day. I'd show up late, be miserable, like feeling like crap, right?
Totally.
And I just didn't get it. And I look back on that and now it's not me. Like that was just some kind of, I don't know what was going on. But once I figured out, because then I would forget why I went there.
Yeah.
Right? Just like you said. And now it's like a totally different, I'm so intentional and I'm looking for the right people to be around and surround myself with that I can serve. And it changes the ballgame.
Well, and it's a magnet. You're a magnet.
It's huge. What you
and
talked
it's
about,
a different.
man.
It's a different energy, because I think early on people have like this hustle mentality, and what people don't talk about is the burnout that results from that. Right? Yeah. I've seen many. You know, I work with a lot of really big influencers. We're talking about like one of my clients has 35 million followers. Right? The pressure required to sustain that following and the content. It's why so many people burn out, and so many people have very public burnout. And it's like, you've got to create something that's sustainable, but also you have to know that hustle thing, it'll work for a period of time. But if you're married, if you have kids, if you want to be in a relationship, if you want to have any of these things, it's not about balance. It's about figuring out how to integrate it. Like I always say,
and evolve, right?
1000%.
With the family life,
my
you might have
family
kids.
is enrolled. And what I mean by that is my son, my daughter, my husband. You can ask any of them what I do. My kids are my greatest referral partners, because, my son's in college at ASU. He's in a fraternity. He's listening for opportunities. I give them referral fees like I would to any partner. Same thing with my husband. We're all on the same team. And I think a lot of people forget to enroll their spouses and their kids into what they're doing. And that's where it's a family business, man. My husband's a corporate guy. To be clear, he's a Fortune 50 guy. He is not an entrepreneur. However, we support each other. So when I need to go be corporate wife, I'm there. We're hosting dinners. We went fishing with his team in Idaho for 5 days. I'm there. I'm supportive, and he's the same for me. And I think a lot of times there can be friction again, and not having the confrontation of, hey, what are we agreeing to do? Right? When I went on tour for Google and I was gone for like 220 days plus a year, that is a commitment at a time where our kids were like in elementary school and middle school. I mean, I was going to parent-teacher conferences on FaceTime. I was doing all this stuff. And then add being a woman, where the idea of what being a mother is and how that's judged by people is really fascinating to me. I have tons of empathy for people. But, they'd ask me like, I always get the question, how hard is it to be a mom? And then I'd look at my buddy and I'd be like, ask Tim. Tim's got like 6 kids. I only have 2, right? I'm really good at deflecting because I think it's a disservice, right? You can be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want as long as you enroll everyone in your sphere and you guys are all working towards a collective vision. And what was the collective vision? The vision is early retirement. The vision is having fun while we're doing it. The vision is being able to go on a vacation and not have a budget, and everyone's on board. And I think that not a lot of people talk about that. Yeah. Right? Like I loved specifically the event we're at because some of the kids are there, or, I think it was the Ideal guys, they had their babies with them, their toddlers with them.
That was awesome.
Growing up in those environments, I think is such a great thing for kids, because it's like, as soon as they can get out of the matrix and realize like, my daughter's got a side hustle, my son has a side hustle, they're making thousands of dollars a month,
I've seen some kids in families go to parties and bars, and you see the kids running around like with that kind of environment versus like an entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I think crazy. It's a different environment, but I think like I always laugh because my parents were like school teachers and immigrants, right? My dad marched with like Cesar Chavez and did all this crazy shit. And it's funny because they were educators, but they, in the 80s, there was a call out for Amway, right?
Yep.
And they wanted Asians and Hispanics. And my mom's like Pacific Islander, my dad's Hispanic. And the mentorship, right? Like all the things I would hear about on these tapes and all the stuff that they'd make me do and these presentations where you look an adult in the face and you do all this stuff now serves me so well. So I joke that like anybody that had talks too much on your report card, like how's life as an entrepreneur, right? Because you're probably
I was like that. I got in trouble for talking all the time.
And it's like,
and they try to suppress you.
They try to suppress you, but like once you realize you can do whatever you want, that's actually how they got their first home. And they were mentored by so many people that like people reference today. And I got to meet those people as a kid. And I think that puts you on a totally different frequency.
Yeah.
Your brain goes to a different place, right?
100%, man. I wanted to talk about what you do. Just for the audience to make sure they understand, like, what is it that you do?
So as a brand and business strategist, I focus mainly on brand narrative and monetization, meaning what do people need to know about a person, a brand, or a company? And then where are hidden revenue streams in a business? I personally believe that every business has 3 to 4 unexploited revenue streams. People focus a lot sometimes on the wrong metrics in their company. So when people are like, oh, I want to go viral, it's like, okay, I've gone viral, right? I went viral for not moving my seat on an airplane, right? I got
not doing what
I didn't move my seat on an airplane. I wasn't going to move. I was sitting in a seat.
So a couple came up and said, hey, you
yeah,
mind?
they're like, hey, like our kids and coach, we want to sit by the kid. Yeah. So
when was that?
Shit, man, it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember.
So it was everywhere. I mean, I made it to New Zealand. I made it.
Oh, man.
And it's one thing to want to go viral for the thing that you do. It's another, you cannot control what pieces of content you put out will go viral.
Yeah.
It's never the beautifully produced thing.
100%.
It's always the garbage that you're like filming in an airport or whatever.
Yep.
And the thing is if I had been like a product-based business, right, and you go viral, all of a sudden you have a ton of things to fulfill, and are you ready for that?
Right.
And if you're not, you're going to disappoint people. On the other hand, when you get a bunch of followers that are not even your target audience, that's going to destroy your engagement. So you have to look at it like with intentionality, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, what I look at is I test things on every platform. I have a following, combined following, a couple 100,000. And, I have a newsletter, but I do my newsletter really different. I only share stuff when I have something interesting. It's not a content machine. I think the trends are showing us right now that people are watching podcasts in the longer form. TikTok, you can upload a 60-minute video. Instagram's testing 30-minute videos right now. What that means is people are getting short form content fatigue. So I tend to be ahead of the trends, but for companies, I can create a really beautiful narrative around why something is important. Like, so for Google, what we did was we looked at the questions we would ask a business owners, like, are you there? Do you like what you see? Right? Mm-hmm. Google yourself, Google your business. What are you seeing out there? Is it your MySpace profile with you drinking on spring break?
Right.
Probably need to take care of that, right? But also with monetization, it's like sustainable revenue streams are really important for any business. Cash is like oxygen to an entrepreneur. And I see so much missed opportunity because it's not about reaching, depending on what you're selling, right? If you're selling a widget, a water bottle, a cell phone, a microphone, that's one strategy. But if you're in a service-based business, you are selling yourself and the authenticity that's required, right? Like you can't be one thing on camera and another thing off.
Doesn't work.
So you have to find the through line, and I have to find the story, and I have to look at the origin story, and that's so important, right? You met my buddy Aaron, right?
Yep.
And that guy, when you look at it,
love Aaron. He's awesome.
Dude, he was sharing an office by the Santa Ana airport, had to put calls on hold because the whole building would shake when he started his company. No outside investment. I think he bought the business for $1. You scale it 75x, you sell it to Walmart. That's a great story.
He took something without raising capital to how many? 2 billion?
To 2 billion.
2 billion.
To 2 billion.
Yeah.
And
shout out to Aaron.
Shout out to my boy at 75X Strategy. But the reason we named it that is because it's something he's done. And I think sometimes people get excited about potential and their own potential. And so they're selling from potential, not from like the actual expertise. And that's scary, right? Because if you're selling something that you've never done before and you're trying to be someone's Sherpa, it's dangerous because people are putting their trust and belief in you. So my job is to come in and assess. And a lot of times, honestly, it's just fixing. there's a lot of narrative around like, bros in the space. And I always joke, it's like my mentors have all been men.
Yeah.
I went to women. I went to diverse people. I asked for mentorship. I offered to pay for mentorship. And a lot of what was told to me is like, that's not available to you.
And there's a difference between a man and a bro.
Yes, 1,000%.
Because there's a lot of bros out there. And what do you think they're doing that for? Just to be relatable to people like that are solopreneurs or something?
I think what happens is it's a sameness problem, which means if you're only surrounding yourself with one type of person, you don't know any better, right? For me, I have people that work for me that are 18. I have people that work for me that are 80. I want people to disagree with me. I want a different opinion. I want that. And again, in the work that I do, it's a commitment. I love what I do, but it's also for me to give away time. I've designed my life in a particular way. Like I don't work Mondays and Fridays. I like just having that flexibility. If we want to go on a trip and last minute we can bounce, right?
Yeah.
I also set exceptional boundaries with clients. Like I charge for responsiveness because I feel like somehow people believe that Slack and texting and all of this stuff is efficient. I just don't. I don't believe that. I believe that if I'm in my genius, I don't need to be interrupted when I'm in that zone of genius. And people really, when you set the boundary up front, people do not mind being disappointed, but they do not like being surprised. And I think any engagement that I've ever gone into where that's been a thing is just
well, in business, in all the businesses I've done, the times that I did not set boundaries was because I was scared. I was afraid I was going to lose that customer, the revenue. I was going to have to refund somebody. I was operating out of this scarcity.
fear. It's fear. Yeah.
Fear can be a beneficial thing to have too, but you have to have a boundary with it. But then once I started to realize, like, wait a minute, setting boundaries and getting what you mentioned, getting really clear on what you want, and then designing your life the way you want to do it is possible.
One of the first things we do with people, and I don't care if it's a division of Facebook. I don't care if it's a guy that has, a bunch of, I work with a Mexican food restaurant chain here, is like, how would you like to spend your day?
Yeah.
And the pause and the like, I've never thought about it, right? It's like, well, if you've never thought about it, no wonder you're in chaos. So let's figure out, what does your day look like? How much time are you spending with your family? How much time are you budgeting for just thinking, right? That's on my calendar every week. I have time for thinking. I have time for learning. It's the reason why I can just get up and bounce and do whatever I want. Is it took some time to get there, right? I had to really think about, what am I trying to create and what do I want to build? And what I knew is I didn't necessarily want to be this content machine. At the time, I've lost about 85 pounds in the last couple of years. I was supremely unhealthy. I wish that I had prioritized my health sooner.
Yeah, me too.
I think everyone does. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, now this is just who I am. Like who I am as a person, and all the things that it takes you to be that person. It's like identity work, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're working with a division of a company or a founder, it's like, how do you guys want to run? Right? And the first thing I knew when I started my company is we are a no email company, meaning the only people that we are emailing with is potentially clients when they're first coming in. But as a team, we communicate on different platforms. We have meetings asynchronously. I hate recurring meetings with a passion. If we don't have to have the meeting, we don't. And it's so freeing to not have to get up in the morning and check my email. Like I have people that are doing that, right? That was the first hire that I made. If you don't have an assistant, you are one, right? So the first person that you need to think about, and the most important person in your life, is your EA.
Get your time back.
Dude, you
just time and attention.
You really only have, if you are a solopreneur, you probably really only have about 20 hours of billable time a week to work with clients, because the rest is doing admin shit and content and marketing, right? And so most people, when we do that exercise, what they get to is like, how they've been spending their time is not what they want. And so it's like, well, let's stop that.
Well, I can tell you, when I figured this out, when I was in the mortgage industry, we scaled this business. I started growing from Delaware to Miami, had hundreds of employees. We're doing their thing, and I was feeling guilty because I was delegating and I had so much more free time. I was on the golf course 3 times a week, but we were doing more. But I had this guilt inside of me.
I think that the founder's guilt thing is a real thing because somewhere early on we're told that that work harder. You got to work hard. You got to work hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, there was a period of working exceptionally hard. And there's a period of like even going to golf can be work, if you're doing it with
networking
clients,
like crazy.
right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
But still felt guilty.
and the networking component of what we do is so important, but also so is just having time to be a student, be curious, right? Like I think so many people get stuck in one way of thinking and being. And I can tell you, I didn't really discover, actually my buddy Adam Jablin and I were in Miami, we were talking about it. I was getting ready to go to Iceland and I was saying the thing that was missing in my life, even being sober, I cannot quiet the mind. Like my mind is on all the time. It's why I have like the most aggressive sleep routine, right? Like I have all these things, people talk about coaching and mentoring and I'm like, listen, you need coaches and mentors for different things in your life, right?
Yeah.
Whether if you're going to hire to scale, that's one type of person. If you're going to do monetization, that's another type, marketing. But really the integration piece is the piece that I find universally that everyone has a hard time with. Because what it's really saying is, how do I quiet my mind to reduce my stress? Because it's no sense building this empire if you're going to have high blood pressure, be overweight and unhealthy. And then what happens? You get sick, right?
Yeah.
So for me,
then you have you've had the life that you want with finances and be able to freedom, but yet you're not free.
Yeah, and what happens tomorrow? Like for me, in 2021, I had a stroke from the COVID vaccine. And you talk about your life changing in an instant. You're in the neuro ICU. They're telling you at that time, like, you don't want to see your family. Because if your family's here, that's going to be bad, right?
Yep.
And I just thought to myself, I had been thinking probably for 6 months to a year that there was a portfolio of clients that I just was no longer, they were my original clients and I loved them, but there was just no joy there. And the recurring revenue was pretty decent. So I just packaged it. A buddy of mine, I called him from the hospital. I'm like paralyzed. I can't do anything. I'm like, dude, we got to package and sell. And I got to get rid of the employees. Right across the street from here, I used to have an office of 20 people, right? And we sold half the business so that I could focus on my health. It took that for me to be open to like red light and cold plunges and this whole biohacking thing. But what I found is with that, you get to quiet the mind. And when you can quiet the mind, you get clarity in a way that you never expected. And especially when you're sober at events, I'm really an observer, right? Because you watch, like, are people still the same? Being sober doesn't make you a better person, right? I'm still a little bit inherently of an asshole. It didn't get rid of that, right? Like
I like it. I like whatever you want to call it. I didn't call you an asshole.
But I do think that like the blessing is you can look at the insanity of the past, and then you can see how it shows up in other ways in the present, right? So I took all that effort and energy into partying and alcohol and drugs and put it into work. I worked alcoholically, right? Like I worked like an addict. I was obsessive, right?
Which isn't good either. So you
it's
transferred
not good.
that into that, right?
So, and then I was just like, wait a minute, is this what it's all for, right? And luckily, I was around people that were willing, Greg Reed being one of them. There was a bunch of people we knew during COVID that all relapsed, like there's a lot of people that didn't make it. And part of that, I think, is what I love about being sober is I can go to any state, any city, any country and find a community of people.
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur is the same way. If you're open, you can find a network of people anywhere you go. I appreciate, value, and respect that, I am an open person. People feel that. And so they talk to me, right? And I don't have any expectations, right? Expectations, I think, lead to resentments in disguise, right? Anytime you expected a big deal to close or whatever and it didn't, how pissed were you, right? And so now it's just like, wherever it's going to go, it's going to go. I can shape it, right? I can form it, but I'm not as attached to the outcome. And I find that releasing that attachment in some ways actually creates exponential results, right? Like I was working with a company and it was just really funny. It was like a group of guys and, they'd been stalling, 4 million, couldn't break past it, right? And what we identified was like, they weren't happy, right? There was a component of their business that felt like a drag, which is why they weren't happy. They were stalled because no one was inspired anymore.
Yeah.
And so
that's
I was
huge.
like,
and then they feel like they're stuck to it.
Yeah. And I said,
because that's the original
goal,
idea that they had, right?
I said, our goal is to figure out what's inspiring to you today. Because it's different than what it was 5 years ago. And you're not doing this to burn out, be pissed, be frustrated. You want to do that, go get a job.
Yep.
You know, go work at Starbucks, get someone's fancy latte wrong, right? Like you can deal with Karens all day. You're here because you have something to bring to the world. And so I always ask people, it's like, why are you here? Why are you alive? And the amount of times that I'll get a look on someone's face where they'll go, no one's ever asked me that. I'm like, you don't have to answer right now.
Yeah.
But why are you here? Are you here to bring a gift to the world? Are you here to show some people that what's possible? Are you here to make something easier that was really hard? You know, every one of us has a purpose. And I don't mean a purpose in a bullshit way. I'm here to inspire and motivate. No, I'm talking about
what lights you up.
What lights you up?
Yeah.
Where do you get lost in the work? Where it's
life's
so
too
easy.
short not to be lit up. Like I look back some of the things I stayed in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like waking up in the morning dreading going to work.
Yeah. It feels like dread, right?
And sometimes you have to sacrifice money.
Oh yeah.
For the short term, maybe even the long term, but sacrifice money. But if you gain all the money in the world, but you're miserable doing it and miserable when you get there, like what the hell's the sense? How many rich people do you know, wealthy people that are miserable?
The thing is that wealth in of itself can become a prison if you let it, right?
Yeah.
Because like my favorite client, I cannot say the name, but he comes in from Japan to San Diego. And I had met him at an event in Manhattan, and I kind of said, hey, if you ever come to San Diego, we should hang out. Unbeknownst to me, he's a billionaire, right? So I go to pick him up. I don't have anything to prove, right? I have a Toyota. So I show up in my Toyota, and he's laughing because he loves Toyota and blah, blah, blah. And he's telling me all this stuff. And he said, I noticed you don't have a fancy car. And I said, oh, I do. I said, but I had to figure out how do I get my douchebag cars, but I don't want to pay for them, right? So I started, through a friend of mine, buying cars and putting them on Turo. So when I want to drive the fancy car, I can.
Yeah.
But I just like being in the car where my kids are in the car, the dogs, and it's like there's no stress. I have nothing to prove to anyone.
Yeah.
That is the best space to be in because then you're not trying to keep up with anyone. It's not to say that I don't make over-the-top obnoxious purchases. I do, right? I think everyone has their thing. For me, it's like watches, jewelry, and purses, right? I don't know, like that's my thing, right? And I use my stuff, which is what most people notice, right? Like, but the freedom to do that and the freedom to not care is where everyone should strive to be. Because then you're not when you get something, it's yours. I mean, I've seen too many people be really excited about like a car. And then someone will be like, oh, that's a nice starter Benz.
Yeah,
and you just watch the air.
Oh yeah,
deflate.
And even if they don't say that to you, the novelty wears off. Like I had my one big Mercedes or whatever, and I was driving literally 2 miles to the gym and back home, down 2 miles down to the golf course, back home. And after a while, I was like, what kind of asshole am I? I'll drive a golf cart.
Yeah, but like, it doesn't even matter because it's like every once in a while, like when I go up to LA, I like the Maserati. I like to get in and out and go fast. But my favorite memory was actually like 2 years ago. We were leaving the Torrey Pines Open in La Jolla. I had an NBA player and 2 Hall of Famers, and they wanted a ride because the Uber wait was going to be like an hour. Yeah. And I was like, listen, I drive a CHR. Like, y'all are going to have to figure out how to get in this car. And I kid you not, it was the funniest car ride of my life because you've got,
like
big, it's almost like 6'9" in the front seat. I got 2 guys shoved in the back seat that have the windows down. They're half out the window. But like, that's a core memory, right? Yeah. And that's like something that every time we see each other, it's just laughter and joy. And I don't think enough people like, we got to get out of FOMO and get into JOMO. We got to get into the joy of missing out. You know, the thing is like, when I say I'm grateful every day, I'm grateful every day. Like, it's kind of a funny story I was telling you, but you know, when I was in my active addiction, right?
Yeah, I want to touch on that.
It's hysterical.
Yeah, because I want to know the journey.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could sit here and say that my daughter's father was like a terrible human, but you know, I am a believer that in order to get good, we have to acknowledge our choices, right?
Yeah, you chose them.
And my choice, my choice at the time was that, right? And I made a lot of choices, and I was in this like blame, excuse, denial. I call it being in bed, right? I had learned so much about loopholes in the law, right? So I learned that if you were in your vehicle, even if you were asleep and in the backseat and you were drunk, you could get a DUI. So when I used to come downtown San Diego and party, I would essentially stock my trunk with a sleeping bag and water and a flashlight, right? Now, sometimes I would make it to my car and I would just plan to like pass out in the trunk, but I'd leave the keys. Like I'd leave the key in the
Let's
thing.
clarify, because when you told me this first at the
Yeah.
event, I'm like,
no
you
joke.
actually, I thought you said you kept your stuff in your trunk for when you needed it.
No,
but
like
you
I
actually
actually
slept in the trunk and closed
No,
the door.
like-
you figured out the
like-
latch to let yourself out.
Like
and-
no joke.
oh my gosh. This
I would
wild.
get stuck. And so sometimes I'd have to call the towing company.
From
So-
the trunk?
Oh yeah, like
Wait,
it would be.
whoa.
It'd be like so 4th and F Street, San Diego.
Oh
Anybody knows Cafe Sevilla down here? I used to go dancing all the time, and then that would happen. What would happen though is it became such a pattern where I parked. Occasionally, the dude that would come and let me out of my car or whatever would come with like a black cup of coffee. Now, flash forward, right? It took me a long time.
Wait a minute. I'm going to stop with the flash forward part for a second so we
Yeah.
remember where we can go back. What was the first time when you called the tow truck guy? The first
Yeah, I was
reaction that
like-
they had, like, hey, I'm stuck in my trunk.
I
that's so
think they were like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, I'm calling on my Nokia phone. I'm like, listen, like I'm stuck in the trunk of my vehicle.
Did you
And
try
they're
to like play it off like somebody stuck you in the trunk?
At first,
Did you?
yeah. Because you're still hungover from the night before. You're still
Oh my
actively
gosh.
drunk,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Holy
But
cow.
also,
I never
it's
did
like
that.
you got to understand that the logic of an alcoholic and an addict.
Oh, yeah.
Is like this is exact like there's no thought that I shouldn't drink as much. The thought is like, how can I get away with doing as much as possible, right?
Did you ever meet someone that did that too?
I've met like a couple of people.
I've never-
Yeah.
oh,
So
man.
but here's the
Whoa.
crazy shit about that. So, that went on for a period of years. In my relationship with my daughter's father, I was clear. It was bad. It was really bad. Like I dropped my kid off on like a Thursday and I'd come back on Tuesday. I was actively in it. And I think the people that loved me and were close to me didn't even know how to have the conversation. I was very high functioning. Like when I say high functioning, I was winning awards at work. I slayed 6-figure job. Like there was no, like I was doing all the things. And then one day I woke up, and anybody that's ever been in this really low place where you have to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself, you do two things. It's like you're either in denial more or you figure out like, what's my out? For me, my out was a plan of attack to just like kill myself. And so for me, I remember clear as day, I wrote letters to people. I dropped them in the mail. I went to the grocery store. I made meals and put everything in the freezer for months. I made videos and I wrote letters to my daughter, who was a baby at the time, man. She was like 2.
And you were still partying while you were
Oh yeah, I used
prepping.
to. This is like the hardest thing to say out loud, but I was such an alcoholic that in the morning I would have to have a drink so that I could drive because my hands would shake. And so that particular morning, as I dropped her off at daycare, I was very sick. I pulled over by San Diego State and I took a walk across the freeway. That was it. I made a bet with God or whoever, the force, and I said, I'm either going to stop the pain or I'm going to face the pain. And I walked across the freeway. Now, highly don't recommend, but even with people that I've talked to, we lovingly say there are people that talk about killing themselves, then there's the action takers. There's the crazy people that try to do it. And for me, I did not die when I walked across the freeway. I made it to the medium. I closed my eyes, walked back to my car. By the time I got there, this nice highway patrolman there waiting, and the question was asked, are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm not okay. And, they brought me 2 exits up to a hospital. I checked into rehab. It was not a Promises Malibu on the beach with horses rehab.
Right.
I mean, I was in there with like, convicts and felons and homeless people. That's what I needed. I needed this space to be really raw and honest. And I'll never forget, you're in rehab and they make you do all this stuff and they have this group meeting and they say, out of all of you in this room, there's like 50 or 60 of us, only 2 or 3 of you are going to make it. And I just remember I looked around and I said, you're all fucked. Like I'm doing this,
I'm one of
right?
them,
I'm
yeah.
doing this. And from that day forward, I made a decision. And I will say sobriety in the first few years was very difficult because, they make you make a list of anything that could happen in the first couple years that would make you go out. Everything that I wrote down happened, right? But the phenomenal thing is once you make a decision that you're not going to do something anymore, at least for me, I had done all the things. I didn't feel like I missed out. I know some people feel like they did. I didn't miss out at all. I made a decision. I never looked back. But I also made a decision that I was not going to go and stay in a home, in a relationship that I wasn't happy with. And I left with a baby and a backpack to my parents' house. And I said, I just need 90 days to figure it all out. And it was a lot because I was, there's no trauma. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Your bottom or whatever the lowest point in your life is, doesn't have to be that dramatic. Like I wasn't abused. There wasn't any of those things. Now in my marriage, it was a very abusive relationship. But even then I had to own what I was willing to accept and tolerate. Right? And so once you go into this place of owning your choices and owning your experience in life,
oh man,
when you own it, when you just say like, fuck man, I made all these choices that led me here, I get to make different choices. I literally took like a year off. Like I was so lucky. I had like disability and long-term disability and AFLAC and all this stuff. And I worked on nothing but getting my head right for a year. And I'm so grateful because my daughter was, turning 3. She's never seen me drunk or anything. She's never seen me that way. She went to recovery meetings with me, whatever it is you want to do, whether it's getting sober or making a decision you're going to get healthy, whatever those things are, I don't believe that there's any accidents. I was probably 6 months into my recovery when I went to a random meeting in Lemon Grove, California. And I was sitting in the back and I had a hoodie. I would go in hoodies and I would try to hide, make myself small, because I was still embarrassed. I was happy to be sober, but I was embarrassed about it. Right. And, I'll never forget, my head's down and I'm just drinking coffee and I would do this and listen to people as they were speaking. It was like kind of like going to church. And I hear a voice and there's a man that says, some of you have heard me talk about how this program works and how God shows up in your life and da-da-da-da. And he's like, I know God is showing up in my life today because you guys might have remembered me talking about a young woman that I used to bring coffee to who would lock herself in the trunk of her car. And it was the freaking dude from the towing. And so like, that's the moment for me when I was like, what are the chances that the dude
you there?
That that guy was going to be at that meeting?
He saw you there?
Yeah, he saw me.
I didn't know if he was telling
and I
a
just
story.
remember looking up and I was
gosh.
like, dude, it's freaking Abel, man.
Oh man.
I can say his name. We've talked about it publicly before. But, he actually ended up giving me my first year sobriety chip. And like, that's like our legendary kind of moment. That's not there's tons of different moments in my life, but I can say that like out of darkness is a light, right? I don't go to church, right? I'm not like religious in that way, but I do believe that there's like a force. And, when we're in places where we think we have no choices and options, we do have choice, we do have decision, we do have power. Then you take that and apply that to work and life and family. And really cool stuff happens for you. And if I look at it from the lens of everything that happened for me, even deciding that I was going to kill myself and walk across the freeway, what came out of that was a level of honesty and acceptance of like,
wow, man.
I mean, I tried to get sober for probably 2 years. For 2 years, I tried to figure it all out. Mind you, I'm working a corporate job and doing all this stuff. I was, I'd go to meetings drunk, I'd do all this stuff. But once I made a decision, and I find this to be true of anybody, whether it's life, business, sobriety, once you actually make the decision and fully step into this identity, shit will happen for you.
Yep.
But you have to make sure that you're committed. And I think too, people don't talk about, you have the ability to commit, decommit, recommit. Sometimes you have to recommit to something you've already said. Sometimes you need to decommit because that's no longer a priority and people feel obligation. And obligation shows up in business partnerships and marriages and relationships that are not right. And
it leads to resentment.
And it leads to resentment.
Yeah.
And again, expectations lead to resentment in disguise. So the way that I operate is I always ask myself, like, how do I feel when I'm around somebody?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I enjoyed our conversation.
too.
I
Thank
really enjoyed hanging out with you, right? We would touch point and check in, right?
Yep.
How do I feel? And it's like, do I feel motivated and inspired, or do I feel drained?
Yeah.
Do I feel like heavy? Do I find myself complaining, right? Like, we live in a time today where people are trauma warriors and they want to come into room with their trauma. And my thing is like, everyone has their shit. Everyone has a past. Everyone is building a better present. Some people really, like, I didn't want to be 40 years old blaming my parents for stuff, right?
Yeah.
Everyone does the best that they can with what they've got. And it's a choice, right? The choice to decide that you are worthy of investment, the choice to decide that you are enough.
Yeah.
And how that shows up, you know, when I am coaching or mentoring a founder who is doing a lot of stuff, and we see it, it's an achiever's dilemma. And the achiever's dilemma shows up like this, right? I got to hit this number, this goal, this quota, and then that dopamine comes, and then I've done it, right? Well, guess what? You do a couple of years of that, suddenly that dopamine's not there anymore.
And then what's next?
And here's what happens. What does it all mean? Oh, I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to move to Bali. I'm going to open a juice bar. You know, it's all about purpose. And it's like, no, it's about channeling the right energy at the right time. It's not about abandoning it. And I feel like so many of us that we're trying to prove stuff to ourselves that doesn't even matter, right?
Nobody's
a number
paying
is a
attention
number. You know, I always look at, you know, like you look at a Warren Buffett who goes to McDonald's every day and drives the same Buick and does the same things. And even him, I think I watched that documentary that came out recently, and I think I saw something different than everyone else. Everyone saw the man, the myth, the legend. What I saw and what I continue to see is a guy that makes money for the sake of money.
Yeah.
And when asked about his family, it's the only part in the documentary where there's this hesitation. And you can see it show up on his face that he made a choice, right?
Yeah.
And maybe he didn't make the right choice. And what would life be? You know, he's got more money than he'll ever need, but for what, right? And I think for some of us, we haven't made a choice. We're not in decision. We're in indecision. And indecision is where all the bullshit happens. Because when you're indecision, things are happening to you, not for you.
Call it stuck in a maybe.
Oh, dude. And then you're like, what?
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then you're like a victim, right? You hear this, and the thing is, I tell people, it's like, if you're too busy, raise your prices. Like, if you're too busy, you got to up everything, double it, triple it, quadruple it, right? That's one way you're going to keep your money. But also, what is it you really want? Design your day, design your life. What does it look like? Who are you around? You know, are you the smartest person in the room, or are you the dumbest person in the room? I look at it like, I like to be dumb. I like to be like the dumbest person in the room. I like to be the person that's like, I will ask the question, not from a self-important place, but I always want to understand, especially with people that are married, right? Like, or working, or you have kids, like, how do you do that, right? How does it fit, right? How do you, and someone told me, you got to enroll your family. And from that point forward, I was like, all right, everyone's on board. But the thing that's really cool, at least for me, is that I come from a place of rigorous honesty, right? So I don't like telling people, it's like, when I look at someone's business, sometimes like, your baby's ugly, you know? I got to deliver that message. I do it with love and care and kindness. But also, I think that's what's led to so many opportunities. Like, I work in so many different industries because of how my brain works, because strategy is just the ability to look at things differently and figure out, like, where is stuff disjointed and what can you do more of and less of? And what's the outcome someone wants? Do they want more time? You know, do they want more peace?
What is it that they want?
Yeah. And most people don't know what the fuck they want.
95, 99%, somewhere in that range.
They have an aspiration. They see something, and it's like, I broke down something for somebody, and I said, listen, like, the era, at least for me, of rented mansions and Airbnbs and all that stuff, like, I think when you're a newer entrepreneur, it looks super fun and exciting, but you don't know how to ask the questions. And then you find out that, like, all these people that you're buying shit from, like, they've never done it. And that's where, like, you get disenfranchised, and then you're like, oh, like, maybe I should do something else.
And it ruins it for the real people.
Yeah, and it ruins it for the people that are. Like, some of the greatest experts you will ever meet have the smallest Instagram followings, because that's not what, their job is not content. Right? Like, for me, I do what I call minimum viable. I do the minimum amount of things that I need to do online to be seen, right? Without having to perpetuate this machine of like,
it never ends.
No, because once you start there, it's like, man, like I had supported someone recently, you know, she has, she's like 25 million followers across all platforms. And she said, I've lost my spark and I want to take a break and I don't know how. Because and she felt like even if she went on vacation and she wasn't posting and this and that, it's like she's charging $200,000 for a ticket. It actually is, because I think in the beginning it's exciting, but they burn out. And then when you get to that, what does it all mean? Do you throw it all away or do you just reimagine? And I think everyone is allowed to rebrand and reimagine at any fucking time. At the minute you identify.
You don't need permission for that?
No.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you. If they want to go deeper with you. Where can they go?
They can go to Instagram. It's Maresa SD, MaresaSD. I share a lot of stuff for free. I give a ton of stuff away because my belief system is if I can give you 1 or 2 things that you can implement today, right? And you see that movement, you'll realize that there's people out there that know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's huge. Maresa, thank you so much for your time today and coming in on short notice. Once I met you, like I said, I had to have you come in and share this.
1,000%.
And I didn't even know all of the story. And I'm blown away. And I want to thank you also. Very grateful for your vulnerability and transparency.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be at least one person, probably multiple, that it could change their life. So thank you.
Thank you. And my metric is like, I would share this anyway if no one saw it. You know, that's the metric of authenticity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, go to your favorite podcast platform right now. Subscribe to That One Podcast. Go check out Maresa, support our guests. And keep coming back. Until next time, it's your boy C-Rock, Maresa Friedman signing off. We're here at the Content Factory in San Diego. Be that one.